Welcome to the podcast review show. I'm your host, Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com. This is where we bring somebody on and we tell them what they're doing right and maybe point out some things that they might want to try just a little differently. Joining me as always is my co-host, the one and only podcast talent coach, Erik K Johnson. How's it going, buddy?
Very well, Dave. How are you?
Good. And tonight we have Lionel from amodelerslife.com. And this is not male modeling where he's going to flex his pecs, but it's actually about model trains. And I've learned so much about model trains. And Erik, you were saying that back in the day,
yeah, I tried to get my little guy into trains too, because I still have my trains around. I still have my N-scale trains, and I broke him out. And when he was younger, he was into it quite a bit. Now, not so much. So it's still just me.
Well,
yeah, I was going to say, Dave, if you really want to be like in the know, it's model railroading, not model trains.
Yes, model railroading.
Sorry, already I'm out of the loop.
You own trains, but you're a model railroader.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. All right, I will write that down.
especially when you're trying to impress the girls.
Yes, indeed.
Well, Lionel, what inspired you to start the podcast?
What inspired me to start the podcast was I was on another fella had a podcast that Tom Barbley, and he, my friend, said, "Oh, you got to come on and talk to Tom." And I really didn't want to, because in the world of model railroading, I'm actually kind of a pseudo celebrity. And I'm like, if I go on there, they're going to want to, know the secrets of the universe according to me. And I really didn't want to do it. And so we got on. So finally they talked me into it, and I like talking, and we were talking, and they wanted to know the secrets of the universe according to Lionel for model railroading. And then I was on it a couple of times, and I was always interested in the people in model railroading, not just the hobby. And one night we're talking to this fella, Terry Terrence, and he's saying, and he was an electronics whiz, and he's going, yada, yada, yada. And I know this because when I was developing the cockpit for the Black Hawk helicopter, and I'm like, whoa, let's back that bus up a couple of stops. And I said, can I ask a question? And they're like, yeah. And I said, you said you developed the cockpit? Yeah. He said, I was on the team that did that and built, that helicopter. And I'm like, I want to talk to this guy. Well, nobody wanted to talk about the people. They only wanted to talk about the trains. And I thought, well, I want to talk to the people. So under the guise of a podcast, I thought, it might be fun. I'll interview a couple of people, and I mix it. It's, if you belong to a model railroad club, 60% of the talk is your life and sports and your favorite team and this and that and the next thing, and 40% of it is about model railroading. And I thought, well, that'd be kind of a neat concept of you talking to people about the hobby as well as about their life. And I thought, gee, maybe me and 3 other people listened to it, and it kind of took off and went from there.
Yeah, the description in Apple Podcast says all modelers have a life, but all have a life, but what do we know of it? This podcast is as much about people in model railroading as has it. Wait, let's see if Dave can read. This podcast is as much about the people in model railroading as it is about the hobby itself. Okay, I think we found one thing that might be.
Yeah, I haven't read that. I wrote that 3 years ago. So
every time I read mine, I'm like, when did I write this? Ooh,
yeah, exactly. I'm glad you pointed that out,
because I've met so many interesting people in the hobby over the years. I decided it would be fun to share their backstories with everyone else. So come along with me, Lionel Strang, as we discover just how many fascinating folks there are in this great hobby of ours. So. And Apple, if you could quit putting gray text on a gray background, that might make it easier to read as well. Holy cow. The website is A Modeler's Life. And that's just a model as in MODEL, then add an ERS, ERSlife.com, and you'll find it right there. So, Erik, did you have any questions before we start playing clips?
No, let's dive headfirst into it. I'm excited for this one.
So we're going to listen to the first 90 seconds. I was trying to figure out where a place to cut this off. So we're going to listen to the first 90 seconds. Please let me know if you guys, that's the one thing we didn't check. I'm hoping you guys can hear this.
Lionel, is that you?
There, I think I got it.
Hey, Bruce Kelly.
Yeah. Yes, Lionel.
Super fan number 1. Do you have that on your business card?
Not yet.
All right. We're here with the young gun, Shane the Young Gun.
Yeah.
How old? I'm 63. How old are you, Bruce?
I'm going to be 60. I'm going to be 64 in August.
So we're both 63 right now, which is 106. And Shane is 20.
Yep.
So he's like not even a fifth of our combined age.
Yeah.
I'm still under a third of both of your guys' age.
Yeah,
Really?
I know.
Yeah, really.
By 3 years.
And yet you seem to know 3 times as much as we do when it comes to trains, wouldn't you say, Bruce?
That's true.
Yeah. How does that work out? That's because he's grown up with the intranet.
Yeah.
I
also grew up on the philosophy of sit down, shut up, and you may learn something.
There you go. So how what's your earliest remembrance of the WWW?
Mine? I want to say...
And that's where I stopped it, because it's 90 seconds in, and my first impression was, and this is where, Eric, you can chime in, all those sound effects probably make so much more sense to you than they did to me.
Yeah, most of them.
Okay.
Not all of them, but I did like the way we stumble into the kind of thing, like, is this thing on sort of intro, because it was unique. You're listening for the sound effects and trying to pick out what each one of them were. I was hoping we would roll from that into sort of an intro of the show. Here's the name of the show. Here's what the show is all about. That I didn't get from the intro. I love the creativity part of the intro. We just needed to add a touch of structure to it to tell me what the show is all about. What is the podcast? What's the podcast all about? And who's actually on the show? Because Lionel, I don't know that in that 90 seconds, we actually said your name. I know we said the other 2 guys, and I like the way that you develop your characters a little bit. Like, you 2 guys are the 60-year-olds and he's the 20-year-old whippersnapper, and yet he knows more than you guys know. We're defining our characters really well. I'd like, since there's so many people on this show, I'd like to hear you use your names a little more, so since it's the first time listening to the show, right, I can pick out who's who. I can match voice with name, voice with name, voice with name. And that's important to do when you have a cast of characters on a show.
Yeah.
Even when it's a 2-person show, like with Dave and I, it's important that I say, Dave, what do you think about that? And then Dave starts talking. So then the listener goes, oh, that's Dave's voice. And then he's, Eric, what do you think about that? And then I start talking. He goes, oh, that's Eric's voice. And so we're using each other's names a lot because it's an audio medium and not a visual medium. Making that connection's important. I love the creativity of the intro. I think we just need to add a little bit of structure to it, and you'll be right where you need to be.
I think that's all really good criticism. And I always say to everybody, boy, I can hardly wait till I get good at this.
Yeah, the discussion that you went into there was like, when was the first time you saw the internet? And that was actually kind of an interesting discussion. My only thing that and this is where I'm glad we talked about, like, why you do the show, and kind of your focus isn't just trains, and more trains. That sheds a whole new light on what I was thinking about, because there's a lot of this podcast that isn't about trains at all. I mean, I got a lesson in electricity, a lesson in a whole bunch of stuff. So that makes much more sense, because that was going to be kind of my one and only thing, was like, you guys don't talk about trains all the time. But I see that, but I'm with Eric. I think I love Eric's analogy of your podcast is kind of like a bus. And if you think about it, every bus has a, like, hey, here's where we're going.
Yeah.
And then just, hey, this is the show where, and I think some of us think, well, they saw that in iTunes, or they saw it in the phone. Well, sometimes people just, happen to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I was just gonna say, often the guys that are on the show, they'll refer to something local. And I'll say to them, well, you got to remember, there's people in Australia listening to this, so they have no idea what you're talking about. So I try to describe it. But you're right. Yeah, I'm not very good at kind of like I say, I can hardly wait till I get good at it.
Yeah, the fact that you're 90 some episodes in, it's easy to forget that people might be starting with this episode. They may have just discovered the show. So I think it's important. A lot of people, if you look at the statistics, discover podcasts because somebody told them about it. You know what? If you like that podcast, you're going to love this one. Check it out. So I go on and I find a modeler's life and I hit play because my buddy told me about it. And if more than 50% find out about your podcast that way, it's important that we tell them what it's all about right up front. And as I was listening to the show and critiquing it, I had the same thoughts that Dave had. And that's, man, we talk about a lot of stuff that's not model railroading on this show. And because at the beginning you didn't tell me that's what we do on this show, I didn't know.
Right.
But at the beginning of the show, you if you were to come on and say, hey, welcome to Modeler's Life, this is where we talk about model railroading and the people behind it and the stories that make them who they are, or something like that. So we go, oh, okay. So we're talking about what Lionel's all about when he's not a model railroader.
Yeah.
And so I know some of that stuff. So when we get into the fact that your guest is works on power lines, and we get into power connectors, and we get into remembering the first time on the internet and stuff like that, I know why we're doing that. If I was just a model railroader and I hit play and I thought, well, why are we talking about the internet? I thought we were going to talk about, why I can't make my 90-degree bend match up with my other 90-degree bend because, I need an extender or something.
And that's the wrong color of yellow for a Chelsea.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know what? Yeah, that's a really good point, because I've gotten really good at the end of the shows going, okay, if you want to email us, it's modelerslife@gmail.com. Our website is such and such. You can find links in there. I've gotten really good at that. So yeah, all I need to do at the start of the show is go, okay, so it's Modeler's Life. I'm Lionel. This is such and such, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and just build up a little kind of thing for that. That's a very good point.
Yeah, you may give where you have the young gun on, you may give you and your other partner a little moniker there, so we know kind of if you're the you're the godfather of the show and the other guy is the comic relief or whatever. You kind of have your personalities, your characters that you play on the show.
Yeah, they call me the evil overlord.
Yeah, sure. There you go. And by saying that, we know you're the guy running the show.
Yeah, that's good. No, I think that's a good point. I'll build up a kind of get used to start doing it, like I say. And yeah, that's very good.
What it does is it makes the people who are here every single week comfortable because they know they're in the right spot and they go, oh yeah, there's Lionel, the evil overlord. They know they go through the cast of characters with you. It's like sitting down watching your favorite sitcom and you see the intro and you sing along with the intro and and then they're like 5 seasons into it and they change the intro. And you're like, what do they do? They just changed the intro. That's not the same pictures I'm used to seeing. And so that you kind of want to build that comfort at the front. So it makes your regular listeners comfortable and it makes the new listeners feel like they're included in the club.
Okay. I think I'm going to give myself a tip of the hat because I thought, I'm going to hook up with these guys and I think they're going to help me. And look at that. Already you have. So there you go.
That's our gig. That's what we do.
There was one clip that I was kind of across. And I love the discussion. Well, let me just play it, then I'll explain my thoughts on this. And you can.
I wonder when should we ask him, Shane and Bruce? Let's do it. We'll have a 3-way vote. We have a tie breaking 3 guys. We have a tie. When should we ask him about what's neat this week and Ken Patterson?
I want to talk about how. Well, I don't know.
Well, go ahead.
That's a great question.
What do you want to talk to him about? I know you're dying to talk to him too.
Well, the weathering and whatnot, but that'll comes down the line with it.
Well, okay. So I think we've pretty much covered how he got to where he is today. He's going to get back. He'll get back into cars.
Okay. Well, do you mind if I ask the next question then?
No, I don't mind at all.
Awesome. Jason, how did you start? How did you get started into weathering then?
So when I heard that, I was like, that was a good discussion to have because you're kind of like, hey, we've made it through the first turn, the second turn. Where do you guys want to go now? Do you do any kind of post editing?
I do some post editing. I try to keep it to a dull. Actually, one of the ways I discovered podcasting was when I drove back and forth to Florida. The Nerdist was one of the first podcasts I ever listened to.
Oh, nice.
And he said, he keeps his editing to a bare minimum. So, I take out if somebody's coughing or, but I try to keep it pretty minimal.
Yeah, because when I just heard it, I thought you could have just gone to his question instead of the discussion. And it's just
but the problem is I love to hear myself talk.
Yeah.
Here, this is what I say if you heard enough of the podcast, you will hear me say the reason I started this podcast was so that I could hear the sound of my own voice.
That's awesome.
And then
see,
we go
on the other side of the coin from where Dave is, I didn't so much mind that part of, all right, well, that's pretty cool. Now, where do you want to take this whole journey now? To me, the way that you've structured this whole show as four guys sitting around the table, having beers and just shooting the gip about model railroading and life, like a conversation would go. Sometimes you talk about railroading and other times you kind of get into, the discussion you had with your wife last weekend, and then we're back to model railroading, and then what's going on at work, and then we're back to model railroading. And to me, the conversation ebbed and flowed like that. And the fact that you want the show to be more about the people than about model railroading, I didn't have as much of a disheartening concern about that conversation, because that's kind of what happens when you're hanging out with buds. The conversation just kind of slows down, and then you're like, all right, well, that's an awkward silence. What do you want to do now?
Yeah, exactly.
And then we kind of go into another. That's sort of the vibe of the show. If it were a more polished show and you did a lot more editing of the show and tightening everything up, by all means, take that part out and let's make it an actual interview. But this isn't an interview. This is just guys sitting around talking for 90 minutes.
Yeah, that's the one thing I did like about the show is you all have great chemistry together and you play off each other nicely and you kind of crack on each other. I was laughing the fact that you're cracking on the guest and he's cracking right back. I thought that was pretty cool.
That was the way my wife described it. She said it sounds like guys sitting around the bar having a beer, shooting the crap, and that's pretty much what I've gone for all the way. I think I was lucky because I didn't really care if anybody listened to it. I wanted to do it for myself because I like talking to people. And then it turned out other people like listening to me talking to people.
Those are usually the best shows when you do it because you want to do it and you have the passion for it and you really don't care if a lot of people listen. You just want to do a good show that you can enjoy. That's usually when the audience comes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, and just kind of in that same vibe, I thought this was actually kind of funny. Here's a clip.
Oh, okay. Who's working on stuff? Somebody's working on something. I hear clicking.
That's not me.
I've got a feeling that's Shane. What are you working on, Shane?
Tony Cook hands me stuff for MRN all the time, so I got this Walther's 130-foot engine. But if I'm making too much sound, I'll quit.
No, I don't mind. It's kind of has a romantic sound to it. You're doing
flipping windows out of the skeleton.
Yeah, you're doing it just at the right pace. It just sounds like you're modeling quietly in the background at a nice pace.
So I thought it was kind of funny. On one hand, you could go, wait a minute, if you're doing the show, like, can we have your undivided attention for a little bit? But on the other hand, it got you guys kind of on the road to talking about trains. Like, what the heck are you working on?
Yeah.
So Eric, did you have any kind of weird reaction to that at all? Or
no, I thought that was kind of cool because it's like we're sitting around the shop, you're sitting around your workbench, you're working on your stuff. And, it's like guys that have a wood shop, a woodworking shop, and they're all the neighbors are coming over with their beers. What are you working on? Oh, I'm just kind of building this hutch that, or I'm repairing the doors on the china cabinet or something. And you just sit around the garage and you chat about nothing, chew the fat while you're working on your project. And that's kind of what this felt like, is we're sitting around the workshop, we're working on our projects and just talking about whatever kind of comes around. And you just happen to have a guest come over, the guy from around the corner and down the street dropped in today, and we're going to talk to him about what he does.
Yeah.
It kind of adds to the ambience of the whole ambience of the show, the whole feel of it, the vibe.
Yeah. Cause we had talked about the internet. We talked about whatever he was working on. Then there was a discussion about Canada. There was another, and then finally at about the 10-minute mark.
All right. So how old are you?
I'm 30.
Okay, so how long you been in the hobby? Did you start out like everybody else as a kid?
Yeah, basically. I'd have to say I was probably 6 or 7 when I got my first HO scale train set.
So that was my only thought is at 10 minutes, you finally start talking about trains. And that's where, for me, not knowing at the time that this is not just about trains, but about other topics as well, I thought 10 minutes to get to anything train related might be a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
And I felt the same way because I didn't know the show wasn't just about trains. Had we had, like we talked about, that intro set up, it wouldn't have bothered me that we took us 10 minutes to actually ask our guest anything about him. But to me, it felt like it took a long time to get to the meat. Now, where it goes from here, and he talks about his dad getting him into trains, that connected with me because that's how we all get into trains for the most part. Unless our buddy has trains and they get us into it, we get into model railroading because our dads were into model railroading. That's what they did. That was their hobby, and they kind of passed it down to us. And I loved that story, and I love the fact that you got him to tell that story. This is probably my favorite part of the show, and I think that's probably why I said, man, why did it take us 10 minutes to get here, not knowing that we were talking about a lot of the background. So
right. And the reason it takes 10 minutes to get there is because I got to hear my own voice.
Right. That's what, and that should probably be in part of the intro too. You know?
Yeah, you know what? That's a good point. Something like that. Yeah.
That's what makes the show great. That's what the show is all about. You talking.
There's been several other attempts at model railroad shows, podcasts, and some lasted not, but a lot of them, when they just talk about model trains, it's probably less painful to slam your head into a doorpost.
Most great shows, the hosts talk a lot about themselves, and you feel like you know them. You feel like they're your buddy, like you've known them for years and you've never met them, because they're telling personal stories about themselves. They're not just talking about business, or they're not just talking about podcasting or model railroading or claymation. They're talking about themselves.
Yeah, and all the like, I prefer if all the people on this show have stories too, because it's always interesting. Like, everybody has a story. That's probably where I got the original ideas. Everybody has a story.
Yeah.
Everybody has a story. There used to be years and years, and this what it's like. Like we say about, your dad getting you into trains. What got me into this particular idea was CBS morning show, maybe 20, 25 years ago. They tried this bit where a guy would close his eyes, spin around, and stick a pin in a map. And he would travel to this place, he'd split lip Nebraska or split lip, Wyoming. And he'd go into the town, and then he'd, go into the phone book, and he'd riffle through the phone book, and then he'd hit and it would be that person he would talk to. And everybody has a story. If you're willing to talk to them and let them and ask them questions, everybody has a story.
Definitely. And that should be part of your intro. The fact that you like to talk and everybody has a story, and we're going to find it. And it just happens to be, under the guise of model railroading.
Okay, well, let me ask you guys a question then. Why did it take you so long to help me? Because these are all great ideas. Like, hello, a little bit of help over here anytime.
We have to stretch this show to an hour. Like, seriously, we can't give it to y'all.
No, but I mean, a couple of years ago, you could have showed up and said, "Excuse me." You could have rapped on the door, the studio door. You could have, and I would have, "Hey, it's Dave and Eric. Come on in, guys."
Well, the thing I thought you did, you've done a couple things really good, and I have a quick clip here of you doing something. I was like, oh, I'm so glad he did that.
Yeah, he's a big UP guy, but recently switched over to KCS.
So, and what did you say? You had a T1?
An SD40 T-2.
All right, now you got it. Not everybody knows what the heck you're talking about. So SD40.
So I thought that was great, because as much as later you guys get into the weeds, and it was like, wow, I have no idea what they're talking about. And that's actually, to me, I smile when people start doing that. I'm like, and you can tell, you can hear the passion, and you guys are talking about weathering and all this other stuff, that it was just really, really cool. But
T-2, T-3, whatever it takes.
Yeah. And so I love the fact that here at the beginning, when you start to kind of get into some of the jargon, you're like, hey, hold on, let's back up a second. So, but I did. Now that's the good news.
Right.
There were times when there were inside jokes that I'm like,
Yeah.
And so here's an example of that.
And then we got Shane the Young Gun, who's from Kansas City. And you know that story.
Yeah. As an avid listener of the AML network, yes, I do know that story.
If you've been playing along at home.
Yeah. And if you haven't been playing along, we do suggest that you listen to the back episodes.
Yeah, exactly.
52 and the email shows, both great shows.
There you go. Well, at least he gave me where to go listen. But when he's like, Kansas City, and I'm like, actually, no, I don't.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the number one rule you can break is like doing it. I hate inside jokes. I try not to do it. And when I catch myself, I don't like it. And when other people do it, I try to stop them.
Well, the other thing I wanted to point out is that was at the 13-minute mark. So you're actually introducing your you kind of talk to them at the beginning, but
right.
the actual, introduction was like 13 minutes in. And I was like, again, it's like, maybe you might want to move that up a little.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I just can't get out of the mindset of, so people are actually listening. I didn't expect that. So, okay.
Surprise.
Yeah, I felt the same way that, 12 or 13 minutes in, we finally introduced everybody on the show. I thought that took a little longer. And then as we go through it, I just like to hear you use the hosts' names more often all the way through the show, because if you did that, by the time I'm at the 90 minutes and I finish the episode, I'm comfortable. I know who everybody is on the show. And, when I listen to the next episode, I'm right there and I'm part of the party. I know I'm in the club.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Which takes me, we'll get to your website, but I'm looking on the website under the crew, and there's like 127 people on there. Like, are all of those people on the show, or is it just the three of you on a regular basis?
No, there's, I would say probably now there's like 7 or 8 people that come and go, and they're available when they, the problem is, you asked about editing, and I don't, I try to keep it to a minimum, and like I've basically created a monster here, and people want more and more and more, and I just don't have the ability to produce as much. It's easy to do the podcast and talk to people, but to get the shows out, so what I do now is I try to put out 2 shows every Monday morning. One on the free side, on the Lipson side, and one on the Patreon side. And I've been loyal to that now for going on a year, so that people can expect it every Monday morning. There's 2 shows that they can listen to. But there's people that, so if Joe Blow, if Bruce isn't available, I'll get Tom Jacobs to come on, and if Tom's not available, and so these guys, and more and more people, they like being part of it. So you kind of. It kind of grows, and it's kind of fun. They get excited about being on it and everything. So,
well, and I think that even leads more into using the names of the hosts more, because if there's 4 guys on the website, you and the other 2 guys, and then a 4th guy there that are like the main guys, and then there are 4 down below that are kind of like the supporting cast, like the other guy. So if we're rotating through 8 guys on the show, that even makes it more critical that we use their names often, so we get to know the entire cast and the supporting cast especially.
Yeah, I think that's a really good advice, because that's why I wanted to do this, is because I really have no, there's lots of guys that listen to the show and love the show, but I really haven't had any professional, like, excuse me, you didn't tell anybody who you are. Or like that, I mean, I've been, I'm pretty sure NBC isn't going to replace Lester Holt with me.
and you know what? That's why we do this show, because we know that there are a ton of podcasters who don't know what they don't know. And that's our whole goal, is to just kind of give you some basic tools that if you easily put these into place on your show, that it can tighten up your show and just make it so much more powerful than it is right now, without changing the content or the personality or who you are or anything about that. It's just tighten this bolt and loosen that screw, and all of a sudden we're on to better things.
Yeah, like I can easily see me saying, okay, it's another episode of Modeler's Life. My name's Lionel. I love to listen to myself talk. Tonight we got Shane helping us and Bruce, and we're going to talk to Jason. And we'll be talking to Jason about trains, but it's a Modeler's Life. So the life part is important too.
Yeah, something like that. You bet. Lay
Yeah.
it all out. And that takes you, what, 20 seconds?
Yeah, exactly.
So, perfect.
And I found another clip of something I thought, wow, that's really good. I love the fact that it is very much a conversation. It's you have an idea of kind of, obviously you're going to be talking about trains and things like that. But this was a great example of the fact that you're actually listening to your guest.
And extended use, like what for? Like why? How did they change them?
The hot diesel exhaust in the tunnels, because they're longer, where these units ran, would heat the air up where the radiators on an EMD are up top.
Right.
And it would suck in the hot engine exhaust, and the locomotives would overheat.
Oh, okay.
And so EMD combated that by changing the radiator design on them and putting the radiator intakes near the walkways of the locomotive, which are, I don't really know, 10 foot or so lower.
Yeah.
Which would suck the cooler air from lower in the tunnel so the locomotives wouldn't overheat.
Wow, that's cool. That's amazing, really, when you think about it. There's a lot of locomotives are built specifically for certain railroads for certain things.
And so I missed the beginning of that clip. At the beginning, he was saying something and you said, well, wait, why did they do that redesign? And so the fact that you listen to that, but that cool story about history and redesigning how they, made that engine came about because of a follow-up question, because you were listening. And so to me, I just heard that. I'm like, that was a cool story. And if you just been like, great, question number 7, what's your favorite? It was a cool kind of thing. I was like, that was a good job of just listening and a good follow-up question leading to a great story.
Yeah, most of the people are pretty interesting. I've had a lot, people that, I'll contact somebody to interview them. They'll say, well, what is the topic or the questions? I said, I have no idea.
And that's perfect. You do a great job through the entire show of having that conversation. And an interview becomes a conversation when you take the time to actually listen to what your guest is saying. It's an interview when you just go down the list of questions. It becomes a conversation when you ask great follow-up questions. You listen to the answers your guest is giving, and you let that help you mold the story that you're telling and bringing out that story from your guest. And that's why this show does a great job of exposing the background of these people, is because you listen to their answers and you ask great follow-up questions.
Everybody's got a great story.
Yeah.
And I think this is my favorite clip. It needs no introduction.
How many?
I want to say it was over 4,000 locomotives produced in the SD40 family, including the SD40-2, T-2, the -2 SS, which was a Burlington Northern test bed, and then the -2Fs, which are the Canadian barns.
Mm-hmm.
The T2s were 312 were produced.
Yes.
Yeah, and those UP actually had some of those SSs too.
Because I had no idea what they were talking about. To me, you know what that reminded me of? Sports guys going, wait, no, Mickey Mantle had 37 and then Robinson did that, and Babe Ruth, like quoting stats and
his OBP was 342, and you're like, what is he talking about?
Yeah. Thank goodness I don't have to know it, because these guys do.
Yeah, so that was one that I was like, these are guys that are, up to their neck, and everybody there knows what they're talking about, and they're having a great time, and the fact that they're all learning from each other. No, that was the T2, not the T3. That came out 2 years later or whatever it was, So
yeah.
I love the fact that it just shows the knowledge of the panel.
Oh yeah.
And so that was, again, it adds that educational element to your show. So and that's for kind of like your show is at times for the Uber,
for sure.
So that's the stuff they're like, oh, that's awesome. That's exactly what I thought. I wondered how many T2s they made back in 72 or whatever it was. What's the, like, if I go to buy a locomotive, like just the first train, like whatever they call that. I'm showing my ignorance here.
Yeah.
Like, what's that thing go for?
A good plastic locomotive nowadays, a good one, quality one, and goes for about $260.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I have a feeling that this is not like, $20 Target stuff. I'm like,
Not anymore. No, those days are gone. And I mean, there's still that kind of stuff out there. And I mean, the hobby is huge. The thing that I've discovered from the podcast, like I say, I wrote for the leading magazine in the industry. I had a column in the magazine for like 7 years, and I was a contributing editor for another 5. And I thought the hobby was pretty big. And at one point, they had a worldwide circulation of 300,000, and they were so excited when they got over 300,000. Apparently, that's a big deal in publication magazines. But ever since I started this podcast, this hobby is way bigger than I ever realized. Like, I have met so many people, and there are so many people to talk to. And you were asking about the questions before, and I was thinking, well, the thing I like about doing this podcasting is there's no homework. All I got to do is talk to people and edit it a bit. So it's perfect. It's right up my scale. My grade 12 geography teacher said, this is exactly what you're got in life for you, Strang. Is you're not going to want to do any work. You're never going to prepare. And that's just the way it's going to be. And you're not, and all you're going to do is sit around and talk. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much it.
well, and it's kind of got an element of the Larry King. Like, I want to come at it from the listener's point of view. So like, I have a clip here where you're asking,
what page, Jason, or something like that?
I don't have one personally for my stuff. I run a couple of different ones. Central Indiana Model Railroaders is one, but I don't get on there much. Honestly, I do most of my Facebooking on the Chassis System Modelers page.
Okay.
Is where I post most of my stuff.
And that's a group of guys that like modeling the chassis system.
Yeah, because I'm a chassis system modeler.
So what's it called? Chassis system?
I believe it's called just Chassis System Modelers.
All right.
So I would almost like give him a check mark, like, dude, know your website.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's Chelsea. I don't know. But there was a certain element that where you're just kind of figuring it out as you go along. And so that's where I say it's kind of a Larry King approach, and there's nothing wrong with that. It hasn't hurt Larry any. I mean,
yeah. And I've only been married once, so I got a few more wives to go. But other than that,
I think as we dug into this, I like the fact that we just kind of see where the interview goes. But here toward the end, we're about an hour 10, hour 15 into it, and you start digging through his Facebook page. And you start going, yeah, here I'm seeing this and here I'm seeing that. As a listener, I kind of felt left out because I wasn't able to see that. You're like, oh, here, there's a photo of you and this other guy, and you're wearing the hat and you're standing by your display. And I'm going, well, damn, I wish I could see that. I felt kind of left out, and it felt to me like you kind of ran out of stuff to talk to him about. So let's just open your Facebook page and kind of go through your timeline. And it felt a little meandering to me. Like we weren't tightened up quite enough there. Even if you're scrolling through his Facebook page, go and you find something. Let's say he attended a model railroad show in Denver back in September. And because you see that on his Facebook page, I wouldn't refer to his Facebook page that you're looking at it right now. I would say something like, Lionel, didn't I see on your Facebook page that you were at the show in Denver back in September? And
right.
Say, oh yeah, that was a great show. I hung out with a bunch of people. So it looks like I knew something about you, but really I just have your Facebook page open in front of me.
Yeah.
Rather than me saying, hey, Lionel, I'm looking at your Facebook page and I'm scrolling through because this interview isn't holding my attention. I thought I'd pull up your Facebook page and start scrolling through your timeline to see what else we could possibly talk about, because I've run out of things to ask you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and people seem to want podcasts that are long. Like they all, I would prefer if they were shorter, but everybody's like, no, we want them to be long. And then I'm like, okay. And you're again, going back to the same thing. I really had that's one thing that really bothers me is I'll refer to something or somebody else will refer to a particular photo. And I'm thinking nobody's going to see that. And the only way they're going to see it is if I take the time to put it on the website. And that's probably not going to happen.
Right.
Well,
people say, well, do people want long podcasts or short podcasts? And it really comes down to the topic and the subject matter. Dave always quotes Valerie Geller. It's never too long. It's only too boring, and So you have to, if you think of model railroading and you think of, all right, who are the guys listening to this? You know who I picture listening to this? The model railroader who's down in his basement. He's got his spread. He's working on his mountains. You know, he's getting the green on it as he's getting the tunnel built through it. You know, he's going to be down there for 3 hours and needs something to do. So listening to a 90-minute podcast is nothing for that guy.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if your podcast is designed for guys who get on the treadmill, then you might want a 20-minute podcast or a 40-minute podcast, because that's all he's going to be on the treadmill. He's never going to get through a 90-minute podcast. Nobody's going to be on the treadmill for 90 minutes. They're going to be dead. So it all really depends on your subject matter and where your target audience is spending time. If you're doing a woodworking podcast, make it 2 hours, because the guy's probably listening to it by himself in his shop while he's woodworking.
Yeah. Well, that's where a lot of guys say they listen to it while they're working on their layouts.
See,
the two places is they're working on it while they're on their layout or on their long commute to work.
Yep. Yeah.
That's the two places they listen to it the most.
I had a client once that did a show for farmers, and she sent me her first episode. It was 3 hours long. And I'm like, Judy, it's 3 hours long. And she goes, I know, my audience says it's too short. And I'm like, what? Yeah, she goes, they're sitting on a tractor for 8 hours. They blow through the first one. I'm like, where's the next one?
Yeah.
So it really is a matter of, and so that's where you can kind of think about yourself. Like when you go down to work on something, how long are you in the shop working on it? And that'll be a good gauge. And sometimes your audience will give you little hints like, hey, I really love the show, even if I have to fast forward through it a little bit. That's usually a sign that it's maybe a little too long. But
that's a good point. Yeah.
Now guys are maybe taking a day a week to listen to work on their layout. So is that the reason that you have multiple episodes a week? You have the episode, and then you have the AML products news, and then you have the conversations. Like you're posting 3 times a week or something like that.
I know I could post every single day, and I don't think it would be enough for some people. I mean, it's just like, it seems so I never, like, that's a question I would like to, am I allowed to ask questions?
Of course.
Do I have to raise my hand, or is there some sort of protocol? But it's like, I know nothing about podcasting other than what I've learned doing it on my own. And it's kind of like, I'm thinking to myself, I don't think as many people know about podcasting as the people that listen to it think there is, if that makes any sense. But the people that are into it. And that's what they're listening to. So it's like, I say to people, if I could have a staff, I could produce an hour a day, and there's enough stuff to talk about. But, so what I religiously have gotten to is this thing on Mondays, where every Monday 2 shows go out, and anything else above and beyond that is extra. And you just happen to hit a lucky week.
Well, I like it because if I'm a fan, but I don't have a lot of time, maybe I don't have a display I'm working on every week, I can listen to the episode every week, spend the 90 minutes with it.
Yeah.
But if I'm the guy who's in the basement for 4 hours every Sunday, I have the episode, and then I have the other 2 that kind of supplement it. So it gives me more content to listen to if I have time to do it. But I don't feel like I need to listen to the AML product news episode if I don't have time.
So the question I guess I was trying to ask you is, like, how big is podcasting?
Billions of downloads a year, basically. 60. I'd have to find it. The Edison research just came out. It grows about every 4% every year.
Oh yeah.
But it's up. It's million. I want to say 48 million people now listen to a podcast a week.
Okay.
It's a lot, and it keeps growing. And I mean, it's weird when they're doing a parody of a podcast on Saturday Night Live. You've hit mainstream.
Yeah.
It is incredible. Like just over the few years, a few years back, it was 15 or 20% listened on a regular basis. Now that number's doubled since then. I mean, the number grows exponentially every year of people who are familiar and aware of podcasts, and people who actively listen at least once a week. That number just continues to grow.
Yeah.
Right.
Here's the thing: 26% of, I guess, Americans at this point listen to a podcast in the last month. This went up. The average listener now used to listen to 5 a week. Now they listen to 7. So that
Wow.
something we've kind of always known. 80% of podcast listeners typically listen to most or all of the podcast. And I was looking for the other stat, which is how many listen per week. But it keeps growing and growing. 19% of your audience will listen at a faster speed. I thought that was a funny stat.
Yeah, that I don't get.
Yeah. So, well, you get weird people like me to listen to so many podcasts you run out.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's been growing and growing and growing every year. And it's different than broadcasting, because broadcasting, that's where you have sports and weather and
Right.
cat videos or whatever, because they're trying to reach everybody. Now you have the direct opposite. You have a narrow cast, for lack of a better phrase, and the people that find it are going to be like, oh my god, I thought I was the only person that was into this.
Right. Yeah.
And then they'll tell their other friends that are into this. And so that's where we would love to have what they call hockey stick growth. And it's just not. It's two friends telling two more people who tell two more people. And so every year it just keeps going up about somewhere between 3 and 5%. And
okay.
So
it's pretty cool. I mean, it's like something I never would have, I mean, what you can do now in your basement, you know, with a decent microphone and what have you.
Yeah. And this is the clip I found of you promoting your Patreon. Exactly. I didn't find a clip promoting your Patreon. So that was the one thing that I was like, that we'll get to your website here in a minute. But if you want people to sign up for that thing, it's not going to happen through osmosis. And your website, we'll get to that in a second. But there are a lot of people that will listen to your show and never visit your website. And so that's where you're talking about, if you have a picture of somebody, if you want to get somebody to your website, you can say, hey, this guy did great weathering on this caboose and it was awesome. Wait till you see it. Go out to the website. It's, again, this is episode 106, and you'll see the picture of the caboose. The people that are really into that,
right,
go out to your website, and now they're one click away from that Patreon button.
Well, the thing that happened to me was I did the podcast completely for free for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started the Patreon page, and some people got so angry,
of course,
that there was Patreon. And I'm like, finally, it kind of dawned on me. I thought, okay, so let me get this straight. You're mad at me because I won't give you something for free.
Right.
And it's like, so people were like, don't be,
it's art, man.
Yeah, exactly. And they'd be like, you're going to start promoting Patreon. You're going to be talking about it constantly, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, no, I'm not. Just, I'm not going to talk about it constantly. It's just, it's there if you want it. And the best way I can describe Patreon to me is, if you go to a model railroad convention, there's many, many regional conventions, and every year there's a big national convention. And I used to give clinics. And if you gave a clinic and you had 30 people in the room, you considered yourself, that was really successful. Well, right now, at this exact moment, I have 121 people that are paying every month, and I consider them to be the people I'm doing the podcast for. Those are the people I concentrate on. And like I say, I haven't really chased them. They've just kind of migrated towards it. Like you say, I probably should promote it more, but I'm concerned about going, hey, sign up, give me money.
All you have to be, because I think a lot of people think they have to do like a 2-minute commercial and explain, here's what you're going to get. But wait, there's more. There's, it can be as simple as, hey, thanks so much for listening to the show. If you want more information, we've got more, if you want to dig deeper into the conversation, simply go out to amodelerslife.com/Patreon. That's Patreon. We have extra episodes there for, the Uber fan or the super fan.
Right.
More information. Here it is. And it helps keep the lights on here at a Modeler's Life. And that's it. And those people that will, it's one of those things, the more it's a catch-22. The more you talk about it, the more signups you're going to get. But if you talk about it too much, well, then you'll start having those free people that are like, all he does is talk about Patreon. So
yeah.
It's kind of.
I would suggest a brief mention at the beginning of the show and then a brief mention at the end of the show and call it good.
Yeah.
Don't go into anything long. If you only do it at the end of the show, you're assuming that all of your listeners get all the way to 90 minutes.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah. So I should, you could kind of do the end at the start. Like you say, introduce myself, make it do a little bit. Yeah, that's that's excellent advice. And the only other story I would tell you about Patreon was, when I started the Patreon in August of 2017, I was up towards, I was pushing, I had a couple of weeks of 10,000 downloads where I had 10,000 downloads in a week. And I was pretty excited about that, considering I was looking for 3 when I started. And then, so I started on the off. What I've promised everybody is you get 2 interviews a month. That's the only thing I ever promised anybody when I started is we're going to have 26 shows a year. There's going to be 2 interviews a month. And then quickly the thing just took off with viewer mail and blah, blah, blah. So I promise everybody they're going to get these 2 free episodes every month. Well, then on the off weeks in August of 2017, I went, okay, well, here's some stuff, Patreon re-release. And the downloads just took a nosedive. They went from like 10,000 to 5,000. And I guess people were like annoyed that they were getting old Patreon stuff. So then I went back to every week you get a free episode. The 2 interviews a month, plus you get a half an hour of me babbling about something else to somebody else. So that's where
What's
I'm
the
at.
difference between your episodes and the conversation with such and such?
The episodes are what the show was originally intended was. I was going to interview people, talk to them about model railroading, talk to them about their life, and just that was the basis of the show. Is it's episode 72. This week we're talking like in April we have a 2-parter with a fella named Blair Koistra, who is renowned for having documented the end of the Milwaukee Road in the 70s when he was 18 years old. And when he was 18 years old, he had the cover of a major magazine called Trains Magazine. So we have a 2-part. So we have episode 95 and episode 96 is with Blair Koistra. Everything else after that is an opportunity for me to just have fun.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Me talking to whoever, talking about just having fun. And that started with viewer mail because people started emailing. And of course I love, I'm a closet stand-up comedian. So viewer mail was like, well, if you want to, if you're going to listen to this, there is no guarantee we're ever going to talk about trains, and people love that. So yeah, so all the other shows are just an opportunity. I'm sitting here some nights and I'm like, I started a thing called the Atkins diet with a fellow named Chris Atkins because he's in Dallas. And one night we started talking, and I said, well, wait a minute, I'm going to turn on the recorder. So, an hour and 10 minutes later, we had another show.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's basically it.
That was for Patreon then?
Most of that stuff is Patreon. Yeah.
I'm going to say, cause that's no trains at all. And I'm like, I could see where some people might go, hey, I don't mind learning about the person's life, but you got to throw a train thing in here.
Oh, yeah. And like the Atkins diet is got, every show has trains is the basis. The way I describe it is the best part about this. And I think you could use the formula for anything is I can talk about everything because at some point it all returns to the core subject of trains. So at some point, every show we talk about model railroading,
okay,
regardless of what it is. But because I have this foundation in the ground of model railroading, I can go off and I can talk to Chris about this, and I can talk to Tom about that. But like Tom Jacobs is a fella in Robesonia, Pennsylvania, that's building a big layout in a 26 by 32 foot dedicated building.
Wow.
So, so we talk about that. And of course, that develops into me going, so Tom, how big is that building again? Is it 80 by 140? And, and he'll say, no. And it's just, goes on and on. It's like we're like a really bad Saturday Night Live skit.
Awesome.
Good times. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, here's how you end your show.
All right. So go ahead, Bruce, give it a shot.
I'll give it a try. So if you want to contact us through email, it is A Modeler's Life. That's modeler with 1 L, as in, oh boy, life. Not 2 L's as in Lionel. Let's see.
Well, you know what? You were right.
Hey, he warned you.
Yeah, that's right. Fair warning. All right, Shane, would you like to take a try at it?
Yeah, sure. If you guys would like to contact us via the Gmail medium, you can email us at modellerslife. That's modellerslife@gmail.com. 1L, no A.
All right. Jason, do you know what your job is?
I'm pretty sure I need to say happy rails to you.
You do, but not yet.
Okay, I'll wait.
Okay. Well, Jason, as we close the barn doors on another episode of A Modeler's Life, and the sun slowly sets over the back 40, I guess there's nothing else left to do except for you to say,
happy rails to you.
And as I look at my timer, there's another 45 seconds of happy trails, which is and don't shoot. It's my personal pet peeve. Music for the sake of nothing drives me crazy.
And my secretary's daughter, who's very hip on social media, goes, "Why is that so long?"
Yeah.
10 seconds. She goes, 10 seconds. Turn it off. 10 seconds.
I know people always go, "There's a fast forward button." I'm like, not when you're driving. There isn't. It's like, I have to sit here and listen. And the thing is, if it's the same song, there's a show I listen to. He plays the entire song.
Oh yeah.
And it's the same song. I don't care if it was Stairway to Heaven. I don't really need to hear Stairway to Heaven ever again. It's like I've heard it enough. And so for me, that's a personal pet peeve. I was like, oh, so that would be a suggestion for me.
Lionel, what you might do, I know you don't want to do a whole lot of post-production, but you might add that in post-production and roll it underneath the end of the episode. So 45 seconds left in the show, the music starts to kind of come in underneath everybody quietly. And then maybe at the very end, you say, happy rails, and you're out. And then it kind of gives maybe 2 beats. And then there's a guy at the very end says something or another. Maybe that hits, and then the show's done.
Yes.
Okay.
You can just slide that piece in. That's what I do. At the end of my show, I just tuck it in underneath in post-production. It takes me like 2 seconds. Mix it down, call it good.
Right. Exactly. And you could if what would a really bad podcast sound like? And what would a podcast sound like by a guy who has absolutely no idea what he's doing? That's
we talked about this before we hit record, because it's on your website and then it's there at the very end, is this whole Lincoln thing. So why don't you explain that?
Okay. So there was a fella, Jim Lincoln, who lives in the Boston area. He's a conductor for the Boston Light Rail, not for the mass transit, but anyways, he's a conductor there. And he's a trained guy, and he's a kind of guy that hangs out, and we always knew each other for years. And he kept hinting around about being on the show. And one day I was talking about him, and I went, Bruce, Jim Lincoln Chevrolet's just down the street from Fuller Field and across the street from the Dairy Queen. Don't forget to pick up your car at Jim Lincoln Chevrolet's. And that's how that came about.
And
then,
well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and then one of the fellas, we used to do these fake sports reports about Jim Lincoln, in Clinton, Massachusetts. The Fuller Field, it turns out, happens to be one of the oldest baseball parks in North America. So we did these goofy little sports reports about the Clinton, Massachusetts, whatever they were called, Tigers or something. And then one night, the guy said, we said something funny when it's another Lincoln homer. It's kind of like Bull Durham, that Tom Costner.
Yeah, I just know from an outside viewpoint, I had no idea what that was, and it was kind of a weird, like, what was I supposed to understand that? So it was kind of a little confusing point.
Well, yeah, it is, because I started the show 3 years ago, and that was a bit that we did 3 years ago, and it kind of stuck. And it's like if you pick, it's exactly what you said. Why I need to be more concise at the beginning, because it's like if you came into David Letterman 10 years in.
Right.
There was a radio host that used to do. He was out in LA on the big station out there back in the top 40 heyday in the 60s, and he would end every show with "Terry Delgado, where are you?" And nobody ever knew what the hell it meant, but he ended every show with it. And to this day, I have no idea what it means, but that's what he would do.
It's part of the show.
It was just part of his shtick.
I feel like I'm on. I feel like I'm a rookie rodeo cowboy, and I've got stuck on the Brahma bull, and it's going around and around the ring, and I'm just my glove is stuck in there, and I can't get off.
All right, so we're going to switch gears a bit here and talk about your website. And the one thing I just wanted to point out that if somebody said to me, "Go find the podcast A Modeler's Life" in iTunes," so I typed in A Modeler's Life, and it's saying there isn't one. And this is why I asked you again earlier before we hit record, why is there no space between between the word modelers and life? Because I have to put that in there. I have to take out the space to bring up your podcast. So
Right.
So when you tell people that, when you say the podcast is called A Modeler's Life, you need to start saying Modeler's Life is all one word. Otherwise,
Okay.
they're not going to be able to find you.
Well, that's odd because when I looked on my iPhone, I just typed in A Modeler's Life like it normally would, and it was the first thing that came up.
There you go. See, welcome to the lovely world of Apple.
On the iPhone, it works. On iTunes, on the computer, it doesn't.
Which is really good because the iTunes is nobody's using that hardly anymore. So,
and I have no idea how what I'm supposed to be doing as far as the podcast goes. So,
well, there's a couple things that we can talk about here on your website. When I first pulled this up, and I was like, okay, cool. So I'm seeing it, and I don't realize that if I scroll down, there's a Patreon button here. So I'm looking right here, and I'm like, well, let's check out his Patreon. So I came up to more. I found Patreon, and when I came to this page, it's super easy. There's no way. None of these are links. There's no way to join your Patreon.
Oh, aren't they? Oh, okay. So I've not put the links in there then.
Yeah. So it's on the front page, which I get.
Right. No, and I need to link it. Yeah.
But when you're on the Patreon page, there's no links. And I was like, okay, if that's one of our goals to get more Patreon people.
Yep. Absolutely.
You do a great job of explaining what it is and what it does and the different levels. But when I'm on that page, I can't actually get to it. But the website's fairly clean. You scroll down and everything. I love this picture with all the crew here, and you get right to the episodes. And if I were to actually click on these, if I remember, wait a minute.
There's links there beside the picture.
Oh, is this this is that's a Patreon episode.
Yeah.
So I have to either listen to it on the Libsyn site or I can listen in iTunes. One thing I wanted to point out, and it works, it's all cosmetic. You are using the Libsyn podcast page from 2005, and the new one, just to show you, the story behind, I'm typing it wrong. Story behind podcast. This is a great example of what the new Libsyn page looks like.
Wow.
Yeah, and you've got all your subscribe buttons here. You've got your player, where the old one, again, this was 2005. This is the new one. So I'll send you an email. There's a tutorial I can send you through just to
cool.
To just make it a little more pretty.
And do you know of a guy that I can hire to help me with some consulting at all?
I do. I some guys from the School of Podcasting can probably help you with that, I would think. But the other thing I was worried about is, what if I'm an Android person?
I don't know exactly. That's again why I'm here.
So you're on Libsyn. You can actually have your show listed in Spotify, which it's a weird stat right now. The last time I heard from Rob Walsh, who's the vice president over there, with only 13% of Libsyn users actually adding the Spotify destination, they're already number 2.
Wow.
So it seems to be, so either Spotify, Stitcher, actually you want to be in all these. Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Apple are the big 4. TuneIn is great because it gets you into I don't want to say her name, but the woman in the tube from Amazon.
Right.
It'll add you over there. Spotify is getting into a younger demographic, which is kind of cool. And then Stitcher's been around forever. And all those places, it's free. You do them once and then it just syndicates to those. So that was my only thing, is that if I'm a Android person, you haven't, because when I go to the Libsyn page, there's really nothing over there either. So you might want to add one of those destinations, and it just makes it easy for people to get to it. The one I was also with Erik, if I go to the crew, which is the second button here, there's my buddy Jim Lincoln again.
Yeah.
But like I was confused by the Allegheny and Lackawanna Southern.
Did you lose me?
I think we lost Dave,
Oh, did he get mad?
or he's muted somehow.
Dave, come back. Is he melting?
Now am I back?
Now you're
Yeah,
back.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. This new mixer it does that about every half hour now. I'm like, but on the crew, you have a thing when I scroll down, the Allegheny and Lackawanna Southern, which is this cool thing, but I'm confused as to how that is part of the crew.
Right, it's just my original layout. So that's just a little bit about me.
Yeah, so right above there, Dave, it says Lionel's best known as a builder of the Allegheny and Lackawanna Southern.
Okay, I
It's a
see.
20 by 30 HO scale layout.
Got it. Okay, now let's see. This is proving that Dave didn't actually read the page. He was just,
You know what you might do, Lionel, though, is you might move that Allegheny and Lackawanna Southern heading, if you can, above that Lionel's best known paragraph.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Because then that leads me into why we're talking about the Allegheny and Lackawanna Southern.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's a good idea. So that's the problem. Without any constructive criticism, you kind of stare at stuff and you're like, okay, that's the problem with podcasting is you're the host, you're the producer, you're the editor, you're the website guy.
Is that the photo of your layout right there below the plan? Below the plan was drawn by Bruce Mailboy.
Yeah.
Those are some good looking trees.
Well, it was a pretty nice layout. I got it was a great layout. And, I got the podcasting is probably what my favorite thing. I'm kind of like the guy that won, 3, like I had my layout. I've had 5 published covers on Mono Railroader. I've been in Mono Railroader. I probably wrote 200-300 pages of text in all the years I was there. So, this is kind of the next phase of the hobby for me. And it's just a really cool thing that I happened to stumble onto. I happen to be able to talk, and I could talk to a tree.
And if we wanted to split hairs, the text up here is smaller than the text for the part here on Boy.
Okay.
Again, not a deal breaker, but then we go from big text back to small text.
Yeah.
For this one, and it was just like, if you wanted to make it a little more uniform, that would be cool. I love the fact all the pictures have humor in them. The fact that you've got this picture of this poor guy sleeping, and then the picture here of Bruce with the giant orange hat and the orange shoes. And then you have it labeled here that these people are supporting casts. What is the deal with Dairy Queen? There was another page that I was like, what's up?
Early on when we were getting viewer mail, there's a fella who's still contributing to the podcast. His name is Andy Dorsch, and he lives in Ripon, Wisconsin, which by coincidence, my mother, when she was English, and when she was in World War II, she was in the RAF. Her girlfriend married an American and moved to Ripon, Wisconsin. So from about the age of 5 until 12, every other year we would travel to Ripon, Wisconsin, in the summer. And so then Andy started sending in emails, and I would read these emails on the air. And then one day I said, I was there. I was at the A&W. So then we interviewed Andy, and we had him on the show. And he says, well, yeah, now the A&W is actually a Dairy Queen. And he says, it'd be really cool if you could take a picture in front of it, because we have this thing called Super Fans.
Right, that's the page I'm on.
Yeah, and I said, if you become, if you take a picture, and then he was talking about his mother-in-law, and I said, if you can take a picture in front of the Dairy Queen with your mother-in-law, you will instantly become a super fan.
Okay, I knew it was some sort of inside joke.
Yeah.
The other question I have is Jim Lincoln paying you anything for this? Because he's on every page.
Oh no, he doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. Jim Lincoln Chevrolet doesn't exist.
Because that's really prime real estate for a.
Yeah, no, but I haven't advertised because I'm trying to keep it like.
Right.
I'm thinking, if I start advertising, putting Google ads up there, it's going to look kind of cheesy. And
Google ads are kind of from what I hear, the internet's kind of welfare kind of. You don't make much from those, but I would just think there's got to be a train sponsor or I don't know. That's just me. I just see that. I'm like, ooh, that's, that could be subscribe buttons. That could be a whole lot of stuff, but that's just me.
Yeah. Well, no, you're right. And it's just, it became a running gag. Again, the trouble is I never expected any of this.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know if you want me to tell the story on the air, like I told you before.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So Eric, before you showed up, the crazy part of this whole experience is that I started it in August of 2014, and about the second week of August 2014. On September 12th at 11:50 a.m. Not that I was paying attention. A doctor told me I had stage 4 cancer and would most likely be gone within a year.
Wow.
So I just continued to do the thing. The podcast is something to, something to do. And in the first 6 months, it was like, I tried to do it, tried not to cry on the keyboard too much. And I kept going and going. And well, that I happen to live in Toronto, is one of the best cancer research hospitals in the world. And I ended up there I volunteered to be a lab rat, and here I am. So all of this stuff was just kind of, yeah, okay. The Jim Lincoln Chevels thing, all of it was just like, yeah, sure. People seem to be enjoying it. And it's giving me something to do.
And how long ago was that?
That would be 3.5 years ago, September 12th, 2014.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a crazy story. So then all of this stuff, the Dairy Queen, like the picture, if you go down to,
well, everybody's holding a Dairy Queen cup. I'm like,
yeah, there's two guys holding a Dairy Queen cup. The guy on the left is from Florida, and he traveled to England because he met the guy on the right through the podcast, and he carried 2 Dairy Queen cups with him and took a picture, and they posed this picture. Like, all this stuff is all from stuff we've done on the podcast. So I mean, from a personal satisfaction, I mean, all these people are what I would call good friends and acquaintances, and I've met all these people through the podcast. So what it gave me was this whole world that never even existed. I mean, I have all these people to talk to, and all this time, and they're taking pictures of themselves in front of the Dairy Queen, and they're all what it is they're all part of the party. They're all having fun with all this goofy stuff. And model railroaders love the hobby of model railroading, but they want to talk, they want to have a life as well. So it's like, I kind of tapped into this thing of, sure, let's all have our model railroads and our layouts, but hey, while we're doing it, why don't we do a lot of other goofy stuff too?
Right.
And that's what I tapped into, and it just kept going and going.
Yeah. Because up here, and again, I'm kind of nitpicking. These all have the same text and the same size, and then down here, this gets smaller and green. And
yeah,
trying to make it to tie it in with each picture, maybe. But I just thought, for me, I was like, it might look a little. I just thought.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. Well, I stumbled on doing the website on Weebly.com because I interviewed a guy in Australia whose name is Luke Town, and he's a airline pilot with Qantas, and he has a huge YouTube channel doing instructional videos. And up until that point, I didn't really have a website. And I said to him, where are you doing your website? And he says, Weebly.com. And man, once I went there, I was off to the races.
Yeah.
So again, a lot of this, what I enjoy doing is talking to the people, the editing of the podcast, like maintaining the website, this mailing out of the t-shirts, all that other stuff is all periphery. Like, it's like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And I don't hate it, but it's not why I'm here.
Right. The other thing I found is the EML decal sheet. When I first came here, it says click on any decal sheet below and go directly to the order page. So when I clicked on that, it wasn't. No, see, this one's nice and easy because I have an add to cart button. It must have been another page I was on, and I could not.
Yeah, now that's another company. That's just a fellow that he said, hey, can I make decal sets for you? And I said, sure, knock yourself out. And then, I didn't really care about getting paid for it or anything. I just I don't need that job. You go ahead and do it. Because I came up with a t-shirt and people are going, hey, yeah, let's have a can I get the t-shirt? And I'm like, okay, all right. I'll get t-shirts made and we'll mail those out, and it's kind of like, The thing is just, I highly recommend podcasting as a way to improve your life experience.
Yeah, I think the decal sets, the t-shirts, those things offer the community to be a bigger part of your show. And it's great that other people want to jump in and take that over for you. With regard to the inside jokes, like the Chevrolet dealer guy, I might recommend that you find a way to just make that completely over the top. Like, you remember the old like garbage pail kids? Like, it looked like it was for real. But the tagline, you're always like, oh, okay, now that's obvious that it's, you know. So on the Jim Lincoln Chevrolet Oldsmobile on the High Street extension, you know, you might have something on there like the quote up here that says, I just got a great Jim Lincoln deal.
Right.
You might make that quote like completely ridiculous. Like, you know, the Jim Lincoln car I got wasn't half bad or something like that. Like,
yeah.
Nobody would really say. So that kind of just it makes you go, well, this can't really be real, you know. And you know, there's one where you have a picture of actually Jim Lincoln on there. You know, maybe that one says, I won't screw you too much or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, so people get that it's not an actual Jim Lincoln dealership. Like it's so like you actually have to take time to read it to go, wait a minute.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's all. Yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that just was like, it just all grew out of me sitting here kind of going, yeah, okay, so we'll do this. And then I had this crazy life experience, and you know, I kept at the early days, it was very hit and miss. It was very like you know, I'd interview somebody and then maybe I'd put the podcast out, and you know, there was a lot of stuff going on. And I mean, you know, let me tell you, somebody handing you a shovel and telling you to start digging, and then 3.5 years later, you're going, the doctors are saying, you know, you got to kind of maybe forget about that and start going back to really, you know. So you're kind of like, all this other stuff is like, wow. And I met all these cool people through this podcast. So that's why I came to you guys, because I need some sort of guidance. I need some sort of, what the heck am I doing here?
Yeah, that makes sense. Dave, I think we lost your mic again.
I think the show's better this way.
Oh, wait, he's back.
Okay, I should be back now.
You're back. You're good. Yes.
I did notice on this button, when you click on it, this is the one I think that confused me. No, I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna have to find that. There was a page I went to, and I had to click. Maybe that's why, because I clicked on I bet that's it. I had to click on a flag to go to a store, and that wasn't super.
Yeah, that's right, man.
Yeah.
If I go to decal sets, so let me. How do I share my screen?
Let me stop sharing my screen. Hold on. There you go. And now you can. I think. Do you have that right in the upper left-hand corner?
Upper left hand. Oh, you know what? I need to hit I have to get over there. There we go. Screen share. Right?
Yeah.
There we go. Application window. It's thinking. It's thinking.
It's probably going to ask you to install something or whatever.
Oh, Lord.
So this Zoom thing you sent me, this is Google Hangouts. Is it the same as the Zoom thing?
No, I'm not sure. The Zoom thing happens. I'll have to remember why we use that.
All right. So if I click on AML decal sets up here, I get this page, which has nothing for me to actually do. Is this the page you're on, Dave?
Click on the one where it says Precision Design Company, the orange button at the top, because that looks like it's something to buy. The orange button.
Yeah,
right,
this one right here.
So when you click on that, I believe.
All right, when I click on it, it goes to Precision Design Company.
Okay. If you scroll down now.
Yeah. So this is all I get.
There's the one when you have to click. You'll see there where it says, go up a little bit. There it goes. Select store to see prices. And that, the first time I went to it, took me, I just kept going.
Oh, right here.
Yeah. You have to click. And I clicked on USA. Now, the next time you go back, it set a cookie to know that you're from the US.
Okay, so that's another whole website. That's nothing to do with me. So quit yelling at me about that. That's just the guy that wanted to do decal sets, and I said, "Sure, knock yourself out."
Got it. All right.
You guys are just reaching now. Come on.
That's it.
We're making stuff up as we go.
The only other button I would put on, Eric, if you can,
how do I stop sharing?
Should be at the bottom of the screen, a little blue button that says stop sharing.
Oh, down there. There it is.
Yeah. Because the one time I hit the wrong button, I saw stop and it was stop broadcast and it killed the whole thing.
There, I should be done sharing.
Yeah.
The only thing I would add here is under more or somewhere on this page, subscribe.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
You need a button for click here to subscribe in Apple, click here to do Spotify,
All right.
click here. Because the one thing that helps your downloads is subscriptions, because that stops people from having to go back and go to your website every week and things like that. But everything else, when I went through here, I liked the listener photos. I thought that was cool. Have you ever thought of having a Facebook group?
I do have a Facebook page.
Okay. Oh, no.
Facebook page or Facebook group?
Facebook page. I went that way because I wanted to be able to control what was on the main page.
Because a group, it can be really handy to just to show you real quick the behind the scenes here of the School of Podcasting. What I love about it is they're able to share. I have no idea why Robert Luce is sharing fitness and nutrition.
See, I was concerned that there'd be so much stuff on the page, then my announcements of the podcast and this and that would get lost. I have visitor posts on the
you can pin stuff. Like I have this pinned right here that basically says play nice and don't spam us.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So Lionel, what you can do is keep your Facebook page where you post stuff about that you want people to know and things like that, because you'll need your Facebook page in order to have a Facebook group, because the group has to have a page to link to.
Oh,
It has to be like a parent page. And then you create the Facebook group that's a members only. People have to apply to get in. So you look at them and you go, okay. And then like Dave has, you pin that to the top. So you're telling people play nice or I'm going to kick you out, basically.
Okay. All right.
Flower it up however you want. You put that at the top, and then people can come in and post questions and things like that. But if they're getting out of hand, then you just give them a warning. And if they continue to do it, then you just eject them and kick them out.
Yeah.
But the Facebook group then are people who can get in and talk about particular things. And then you can also post on your Facebook page. So as people are fans of your page, they see what you're posting specifically. They don't have to be a member of the group to see your page. But they do have to be a member of the group to see what's in the group.
Okay, cool. And on the Facebook page, there is a visitor post, and a lot of people post there.
Yeah. So it gives your audience a chance to interact with each other, which can then give you topics for the show. And what happens is in some cases, I know there's another podcast I listen to called She Podcast, and it's for women podcasters. And they have people that join that group that don't know there's a podcast, but that then leads them to the podcast. And then And then the podcast leads them to training classes that they offer. So in your case, you might end up with people in the model railroading Facebook group that then lead to more listeners, that then lead to more patron people.
Okay, cool.
So,
all right.
And it's free. And it's one of those things you can always try it. And if it turns into a giant cluster, you just go, all right, and we're done. See you later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Nobody else's headache.
Shut it down.
Yeah. Eric, did you have any other comments on the website before we start wrapping things up here?
Two things about the website. I love the clean look of it, and I love that finding the show is easy. I can't tell you how many websites I go to, and trying to dig for the podcast is a challenge. I love the fact that you scroll down and the latest episodes are right there, super easy to listen to. And I like the website. It shocked me how many people were on the crew page, but other than that, I thought the website was great, and I love the clean feel of it.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Trying to keep it neat and clean.
Yeah. So as we wrap it up, I think the biggest thing that I learned was I was listening to it the last couple of days thinking this was a train show. And so most of my stuff was, why are we talking about electricity? Why are we talking about this other stuff? So that makes a whole lot more sense now. So I would definitely say that up front. and frame.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a really good tip is to kind of work up some sort of little
Yeah.
ditty when I start the show. Yeah.
Usually it's welcome to the blank blank show where we blank.
Yeah.
It's an easy template.
I was just trying to avoid being formal because it seemed to start out again. It all goes back to how do you know people are listening?
Yeah, they are. And they're kind of used to that just from, not that we're trying to be radio. In fact, in many ways, we're trying not to be radio. But
Right.
nonetheless, if we can kind of let them know where they're going to go, if we can kind of go back to the bus analogy,
Yeah.
they're more likely to get on. And,
Yeah.
and more importantly, they're more likely to stay on.
Yeah.
Because if they start and all of a sudden we're talking about the internet in Canada and they're like, wait, I thought this was a train show. They're probably going to get off because they don't know what they have. So
yeah, give it enough structure to give it some decorum, but keep it loose enough to keep it a podcast.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's cool.
I thought the audio quality was fine for having that many people on it. You're always going to have somebody who's a little louder than the other guy, but all in all, I didn't have to reach for my volume knob at all. So I thought that was fine. And I like the stories like Erik was talking about, the guy with his dad. I still like the internet story. Where were you when you first saw the internet? I thought that was an interesting thing.
Right.
I didn't understand it at the time, but the helicopter turning on the electricity in places was it, it's like, well, that's different. And so, for me, I would tighten up things a little bit, but I don't know that's now that I understand the vibe of the show, maybe that's not the best advice. Erik, what were your kind of final thoughts?
Exactly that. I would have said tighten a lot of it up, not knowing that it's a show about people rather than a show about model railroading. Model railroading is just the common thread through everything. If you put that up front and just kind of clue me into that as we're walking into the show, it all suddenly comes together.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest recommendation. Otherwise, I thought it was great. It sounds like guys hanging out in the shop, talking shop and talking life. And that, to me, it was a fun show. I didn't have a problem that it was 90 minutes long because that's what your audience needs. That's what they're doing when they're listening to the show. I thought the content ebbed and flowed like guys sitting around having beers, talking about life. And they just all have model railroading in common. So I thought the show was solid. Just a couple tweaks here and there will make it a little stronger. Otherwise, you're good to go.
Yeah, that was another clip that I didn't play, but there was one where one of your co-hosts, I think you were done with the interview or something like that, or he was talking about something, and they're like, they just kind of politely was like, hey, I think we've got all we got out of this topic. I think it was when you were talking about the electricity, and they were kind of like, all right, let's move on to something else. And it was kind of cool that one of the co-hosts was kind of like, all right.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, let's do that. And so you listened to them and kept on moving. So I thought that was another good thing that you kind of all keep each other accountable to, like, all right, let's move on and that whole 9 yards. But
yeah, I guess what I was trying to say before is that what we've built is a community. Like we even have this year, like last year, we had a picnic and they're in Rochelle, Illinois. There's this actual railroad park where the BNSF and the Union Pacific cross, and there's park, and we had a picnic, and we're having it again this year. And it's like we've built a community.
Nice.
So, Dave, do you know what BNSF means?
No.
BNS. What is it? BNSF?
BNSF.
Something. No.
Two of them merged.
Yeah.
This one merged with that one.
Yeah. So Dave, when did you get a train set as a kid?
I did not.
Oh
man,
missed out.
No, not at all.
It's Burlington Northern and it's Santa Fe.
Ah, there we go. See, now that makes sense. See, the railroads I know are B&O and what's the other one on Monopoly?
Wabash. Okay, so I have a question for you guys because on it's a regular thing that I ask people on the podcast or if they post stuff on the page. So I have to ask you this question. So how did I sound?
How do you sound on the show?
Yeah. I'm going to post a link to this show for all my fans to listen to.
Uh-huh.
So I often say when they'll make a comment about the show that's completely about, Jason Quinn did this, and this, and this. And the only answer I'll give them is, cool. How did I sound?
No, you were actually great. Very open to feedback. We've had people on here that got really defensive real quick.
Yeah.
Well, I've been wildly angry since the start.
We could tell.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, you can
Oh Lord.
you can find Lionel over at amodeler'slife.com. You can find Erik over at podcasttalentcoach.com. Erik, what's coming up in the future on Podcast Talent Coach? Anything fun?
Yeah, we've been talking about branding here this past week, getting into talking about interviewing again and the finer points of interviewing. I'm actually putting together an interviewing workshop. Going to bring a couple dozen people in and do some group coaching and walk through the finer points of interviewing, turning your interviews into conversations. It'll be pretty cool. How about you? What's going on with the School of Podcasting?
I'm playing with toys. I have a bunch of different toys, things that you can use to like make little snippets of your audio in theory to share on social media. So I'm going to look at those and see which one's the funnest. And then the big question is going to be, but does this really do any good? I guess this is going to lead to more downloads. Yes, it's fun and it's pretty and it blinks at me, but is it going to really bring me any more of an audience? So we be playing with that. And I have another segment coming up it's called Bad, Better, Good, because I'm just finding more and more podcasters are obsessing over things that really just have nothing to do with your audience.
Right. Is it doing anything to grow the show?
Exactly.
Right.
So, but if you'd like to be in Lionel's chair, Lionel, by the way, still have not made anybody cry. So thanks again for coming on the show.
It was great. I really enjoyed it. You guys were a lot of fun. And I thought it was a lot of really good constructive criticism.
Awesome.
I hope we helped. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Did I say it right? Is that the way you wanted me to say
it?
You read the script perfectly. Thank you.
But if you'd like to be in Lionel's chair, all you have to do is go to podcastreviewshow.com/review me, and you can sign up. And that's basically when we put these out. When somebody joins and says, "Hey, come look at my show," we come over and look at it, schedule a time when we can get everybody together, and then we're off to the races. So thanks for everybody for listening, and we'll see you again real soon with another episode of the Podcast Review Show.